Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. December 27th, 2021 in Hillsborough, reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 30, Text 34. Remetaya Chatmarata Atmaramo Pyakandita Kaminam Darshayam Dainyam Srinam Chaiva Duratmatam Remetaya Chatmarata Atmaramel Pyakanditaha Kaminam Darshanam Dainyam Srinam Chaiva Duratmatam Metaya Chatmarata Aminam Darshayam Dainyam Srinam Chaiva Duratmatam Remetaya Chatmarata Atmaramo Pyakanditaha Kaminam Darshayam Dainyam Srinam Chaiva Duratmatam. Reme, he enjoyed, Taya, with her, Cha, and Atmarataha, he who takes pleasure only within himself. Atma Aramaha, completely self-satisfied. Api, although, Akanditaha, never incomplete. Kaminam, of ordinary lusty men. Darshayan, showing. Dainyam, the degraded condition. Strinam, of ordinary woman. Cha eva, also. Duratmatam, the hard-heartedness. BBT translation. Sukadeva Goswami continued, Lord Krishna enjoyed with that gopi, although he enjoys only within, being self-satisfied and complete in himself. Thus, by contrast, he showed the wretchedness of ordinary lusty men and hard-hearted women. I want to just, Srila Prabhupada, how Prabhupada translates this in Krishna book. Srila Prabhupada says, Krishna is self-sufficient. He has nothing to enjoy from any other source, yet just to satisfy his devotee, he treated Radharani exactly as a lusty boy treats his girlfriend. Krishna is so kind that he always tolerates the disturbances created by his girlfriends. That's Srila Prabhupada's translation of this verse in the BBT purport. This verse directly refutes the superficial criticism materialistic people sometimes direct against Lord Krishna's pastimes. The philosopher Aristotle claimed that ordinary activities are unworthy of God. And with this idea in mind, some people declare that since the activities of Lord Krishna resemble those of ordinary human beings, he cannot be the absolute truth. But in this verse, Sukadeva Goswami emphatically points out that Lord Krishna acts on the liberated platform of spiritual self-satisfaction. This fact is indicated here by the terms Atmarata, Atmarama, and Akandita. It is inconceivable to ordinary people that a handsome young boy and a beautiful young girl enjoying romantic conjugal affairs in the forest moonlight can be engaged in pure activity, free from egotistic desire and lust. Yet, while Lord Krishna is inconceivable to ordinary persons, those who love him can easily realize the absolute pure nature of his activities. One may argue that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and therefore the devotees of Krishna are only imagining the Lord's activities to be pure. This argument ignores many significant facts. For one, the path of Krishna consciousness, of developing love for Krishna, demands that a devotee strictly follow 4 regulative principles: no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, and no eating of meat, fish, or eggs. When one is free from material lust and rises to the liberated platform beyond material desire, one realizes the absolute beauty of Lord Krishna. This process is not theoretical. It has been practiced and completed by many thousands of great sages who have left us their shining example and their brilliant teachings concerning the path of Krishna consciousness. So this is very similar to the argument that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a very strict sannyasi, and why would he glorify Krishna's activities with the gopis if they were just some ordinary materialistic thing? And so here, I think it's not just Hridayananda Maharaj, but also Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu was involved, and maybe Prajumna, with these translations, with these purports and translations. Hridayananda Maharaj and Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu. So knowing both of them, you can hear their mood here. But this is also, as I say, exemplified. Prabhupada makes this argument over and over again by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that how could these be ordinary materialistic affairs, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was such a strict sannyasi. So the argument here is, if the devotees of Krishna are giving up illicit sexual activities, why would they be glorifying Krishna's activities if that's what they were? They must be something different. So going on with the purport, certainly beauty is in the eye of the beholder. However, real beauty is perceived by the soul's eye and not by the lusty eye of the material body. Therefore, the Vedic literature repeatedly stresses that only those freed from material desire can see the beauty of Lord Krishna with the eye of the pure soul, anointed with love of Godhead. So what verse is this referring to? Brahma Samhita verse. Only the pure soul can see the beauty of the Lord with the eye anointed with love of Godhead. What is that verse? Many times you'll find in the purports, this is true in Prabhupada's purports too, he'll be quoting a verse without quoting a verse. So he won't mention the verse, he won't quote it in Sanskrit. So this is Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanana Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundara Chintagunak Swarupam. So one whose eyes are anointed with love can actually see the Lord. It may finally be noted that upon realizing the pastimes of Lord Krishna, one becomes free of all tinges of sex desire, a state of mind that can hardly result from meditating upon material sexual affairs. So this is also a very good logical argument. And of course, this verse is stated by Sukadeva Goswami that if you meditate on the Rasa Lila of the Lord, you will be free from sexual lust. So first of all, even the beginning devotees give up illicit sexual activities. So why would they want to meditate on Krishna's pastimes if they were illicit sexual activities? And second of all, by meditating on Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, one gets rid of material lust. And as stated here, that can hardly result from meditating on ordinary activities. It's not that people who watch, romantic movies or, porn give up their material lust. Rather, it increases their material lust. But here we see that Krishna's activities have the opposite effect. I was just hearing Prabhupada say that this morning, how that people practice vairagya, they practice renunciation to become perfect. He said, but in Krishna consciousness, you don't have to practice vairagya. If you practice Krishna consciousness, vairagya naturally results. And Krishna consciousness means to be conscious of Krishna, and to be conscious of Krishna includes being conscious of his pastimes with the gopis, his pastimes with the queens, which might appear to be ordinary, but they can't be, because they have that effect. Does this make sense to everybody? Right? If I'm taking some medicine that cures me from disease, the medicine can't also be the cause of the disease. It's just impossible. Yeah? One final note, the conjugal pastimes of Krishna perfectly round out his qualifications as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedanta states that the absolute truth is the source of everything. So certainly the absolute cannot lack any of the beautiful things of this world. It is only because romantic affairs exist in a pure spiritual form in the absolute that they can manifest in a perverted material form in this world. Thus, the apparent beauty of this world is not to be absolutely rejected. Rather, beauty should be accepted in its pure spiritual form. So this is also a fascinating logical argument that can be applied to many things. But many of you may be familiar with the Catholic monk and theologian St. John of the Cross, who was also associated with St. Teresa of Avila. And St. John of the Cross was tortured by the Catholic Church for saying this very thing. He says, within this material world, we see romantic affairs and sexual affairs throughout all living beings. There are some exceptions, like amoebas who just, separate into two. But even among plants, there's male and female parts and male and female plants. What to speak of among the, fish and the amphibians and the reptiles and the birds and the mammals. And this is what we see. And it's interesting because it doesn't have to be. Reproduction doesn't have to happen like that. Like Vishwamitra Muni, he made human beings grow on coconut trees. And then Lord Brahma stopped him, and he said, no, that's not the way. And we see this attraction between male and female. I mean, it's true among, turtles and fish and lizards, and what to speak of human beings. And so St. John of the Cross said that if this is true throughout the creation, it must also exist in God. How could it not exist in God? And for this he was tortured by the Catholic Church and declared a heretic. Of course, eventually the Catholic Church did accept his doctrine. And we have one closet devotee who's also a Catholic theologian. He's produced many books on Catholic theology, and he's a very respected world preacher within the Catholic world, so he's a secret devotee. He's a secret Hare Krishna devotee. And once when he was visiting Hawaii, he gave a talk to the devotees there. He said we couldn't record it, but it was all about bridal ecstasy in Catholic theology and this concept that one can actually become the bride of God. That one can marry God, that one can have a conjugal relationship with God. So this concept, why would we be attracted to this? And we find that the majority of people are very attracted to this romantic ideal. And also what we're attracted to is an ideal that doesn't really exist on earth. Right? So this is the next point here. Since the beginning of time, men and women have been inspired to poetic rapture by the art of romance. Unfortunately, romance in this world usually leads to crushing disappointment brought about by a change of heart or by death. So I don't know why the word usually is here, because everybody dies. So this means even if you have some perfect romantic relationship, it will end at death. So either your relationship will end because one or both of the parties change their mind, or somebody dies, I guess, unless it usually could be maybe if you die together. Thus, although we may at first find romantic affairs beautiful and enjoyable, they are eventually spoiled by the onslaught of material nature. Still, it is unreasonable to totally reject the concept of romance. Rather, we should accept conjugal attraction in its absolute, perfect, pure form, as it exists within God without a tinge of material lust or selfishness. That pure conjugal attraction, the supreme beauty and pleasure of the supreme truth, is what we are reading about here in the pages of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Reme taya chatmarata atmaramo pyakandita kaminam darshayam dainyam srinam chaiva duratmatam. Sukadeva Goswami continued, Lord Krishna enjoyed with that gopi, although he enjoys only within, being self-satisfied and complete in himself. Thus, by contrast, he showed the wretchedness of ordinary lusty men and hard-hearted women. So there's extensive commentaries by the Acharyas. I just want to read some snippets from Jiva Goswami, just its pieces. He says, after praising Krishna's pastimes with Radha through the mouth of the gopis, Sukadeva himself praises those pastimes. And Jiva Goswami says, material lovers, male or female, who are not controlled by the prema of the beloved, are shown to be repudiated by Krishna's greatness. Material male lovers desire satisfaction for bodies, which are satisfied with food and water, which transform into stool and urine. They are not satisfied because of bodies of Satchidananda, and they do not have natural prema, which brings joy merely by satisfying their lover. They are miserable. The women are also made of stool and urine and do not have Satchidananda bodies, which are necessary for enjoyment with Krishna. And then the end of his Tika, Jiva Goswami is quoting Krishna speaking to Maharaj Ambarish, the nature of Krishna's relationship. O Brahmana, without the devotees who take shelter of only me, I do not desire to enjoy my own bliss by my 6 great qualities. So, although Krishna is Atmarama, he doesn't desire to enjoy his own bliss without his devotees. So we know the nature of material romance. Everybody knows. Half of all murders happen between intimate romantic partners. Half. Most of them are men killing the women, and some of them are women killing the men. And sometimes it's the next category is people who have something to do with them, like you're killed by your brother-in-law or something like that. So somebody related to your intimate romantic partnership. So that's heavy. You know, like half of all car accidents are caused by drunk drivers, and therefore we have all these heavy laws. That's fairly recent, by the way. When I was a kid, there weren't heavy laws against driving while impaired. But it was one woman, her child got killed by a drunk driver, and so she made propaganda which resulted in these laws against driving while impaired. Why? Because it's half of all car accidents. Half of all murder. Everybody knows this. You know, one devotee friend of mine was getting a divorce and seeing in the court all these people getting their divorce. And this friend of mine said, this is sex life gone bad. And this is, you know, we all know people on their 2nd, 3rd, 4th marriages, or 5th girlfriend, or 10th boyfriend, or we all know. And we all know people who are crying, you know, oh, my girlfriend's like this, my wife's like this, my husband's like this, my boyfriend's like this. Yes, everybody knows. And maybe we've personally experienced it. I just got a message the other day from somebody that I didn't know, and saying, oh, I found a drawing of you done by my uncle. And she was telling me about him, and there was somebody that I went to art class with in high school. You know, and she's telling me, oh yeah, he went through 3 marriages, he's passed away now. And when I first met him in high school, when I was 14, I fell in love with him. I'm like, oh, I want to marry him. Thank you, Krishna, he never fell in love with me in return. But, you know, it's just like this. This is the world. So we might think, well, why would God do that? Right? Why would God engage in this sort of activity that brings, you know, so much pain to so many people? We're actually astonished if people are in old age and they're still in love with their spouse. You know, I mean, even people who stick together, it's often not that because they're madly in love with each other still. I know the modern idea is, well, if I don't feel madly in love with you anymore, I'm going to leave and find somebody else. I mean, actually, I just talked to one devotee. Oh, why have you left your husband? Oh, I just wasn't in love with him anymore. Formerly, people used to stick with a marriage even if they weren't in love anymore, even today. But if people are together when they're 80, you know, and they're still in love with each other, it's astonishing. It's not ordinary. We don't go, oh, yeah, that happens to everybody. Okay? So why would God do this? And we have, it's interesting to me also, this argument made at the end of this purport, that although we have this experience, we're still attracted to the idea, isn't it? We ourselves, we may personally have this experience, other people in our family, our friends, in the news, highly, the most beautiful, wealthy, successful people have difficulty being happy in their romantic business, isn't it? But we still have this idea that there's going to be love. And it'll keep getting better and better and better, and everybody will be nice to each other. Yes? Do we have this idea? How much of the entertainment industry does this fuel? This is like, and everyone who gets married or everyone gets a boyfriend, they think it's going to be me. Okay? So why? Why do we have an attachment to something that is very hard to find in this world? This is a very similar argument as why do we not want to die? We all know everybody's going to die. Right? This morning I'm going to go get my last will and testament and my living will notarized. And, I'm writing this up and then I'm like, I really am going to die. And maybe really soon. And it was kind of shocking. It's like, wow. We have this idea that we're going to live forever. Why? So where does this idea come from? From something that's either impossible in this world or exceedingly rare. Like it's saying in the purport, even if you have this perfect romantic sexual relationship, somebody's going to die. And in one sense, that's even worse. When you have this perfect relationship and your spouse dies. Little Krishna Priya was telling me her parents had this very unusual love between them. She said she'd hardly seen any relationships like that. And her father died in a car accident. And she said her mother got into bed and never left for a year, and then she died. So sometimes the more perfect the relationship is, the more painful it is when someone dies. And everybody dies. So why do we look for it? Because it exists somewhere. And we have, Prabhupada talks about our memory, that we remember. We have somewhere in the consciousness of ourselves, the soul, that this really does exist. An eternal life where these romantic relationships do get better and better and are eternal. And people really do live happily ever after. And it really is pure. And it really is love. We have some... Why would we look for this? I give the example all the time that, if we're in a very hot, dry place, we feel thirsty because we're designed to drink water. I had this experience years ago. I was at Radhakund. This is before the days of selling bottled water, and we had given one of our canteens to our rickshawala in Jagannath Puri who wanted something from America. So we were left with one canteen for the four of us. And it was so hot in April. And we had drunk all the water in our canteen, and people didn't sell water in those days. Because we're water-drinking creatures. And there are creatures that don't drink water. There are creatures that don't drink water. They're not going to feel that. So we're hankering for this because that's who we are. It's our nature. And this is our nature of all the beings in the spiritual world, not just the gopis and the queens, but everyone is contributing to Krishna's conjugal affairs. The flowers, right? Krishna's putting a flower in Radharani's hair. And the flower is feeling happy to contribute to Krishna's conjugal affairs. The cowherd boys, even those who are hardly aware, but they're also contributing. Everyone is contributing in some way or another. And everyone is finding joy. And this is true not only for Krishna, it's true for Ram and Sita, like Hanuman. Right? Hanuman, his joy is bringing Ram and Sita together. This is the joy even in Vaikuntha, to see Lakshmi and Narayan together. Even for those in Shanta, most of the residents of Vaikuntha are in Shantaras. So this is our nature. So what is this pure love that we're hankering for, and we're hoping for in this world, and that actually exists in Krishna? It's based on this platform of being Atmarataha, Atmarama. It's based on this platform of being satisfied in oneself and not needing anything. Now, Bir Krishna Maharaj teaches a lot about nonviolent communication. And one of the premises is that you identify your needs and you get your needs satisfied in such a way that you don't have to make demands on anyone else to satisfy your needs. Everybody's familiar with this? Right? This is one of the key principles of nonviolent communication. Like if I have a need for something and I think only Ishwar Chaitanya can fulfill that need, and if he doesn't fulfill that need, I'm going to be bereft. Like I have a need to feel useful, that I'm contributing to the meaning of life, right? And I'm a teacher for him. So I could think, unless he's a responsive student and unless he learns, then I'm not going to feel fulfilled. Then I'm going to put a lot of pressure on you, right? And I'm going to be making demands on you. And I'm going to become insistent. You have to meet this need of mine, and you have to meet this need of mine in this way. Now, how do we feel when someone puts that on us? Get me away from this person. And it's so interesting that, we envy God and we want to be God, but if someone actually treats us like that, Janaki, Janani, Daita, Tanai, Prabhu, Guru, Patituhu, Sarva, Moy, if somebody comes to us and say, you're my everything, you're my mother, my father, my lover, my child, my teacher, you're my everything, and only you can meet all of my needs, we're like, get away from me. Because I can't do that, isn't it? It's stifling. I mean, I had a devotee who treated me that way. And I finally had to tell her, just don't contact me anymore. I can't deal with this. So we have to say frankly that material relationships are often based on this concept that I have some emptiness inside that I'm dependent on you to fill. And this is true in many relationships, whether it's with an employer, whether it's with a friend, whether it's with a parent, with a child, but this is particularly obvious in sexual relationships. I need you to meet this need of mine. In fact, there was a love song my mother used to play when I was growing up. This need that only you can fill was one of the lyrics in the song. So it's stifling, and it's very exploitive. It takes away the freedom of the other person. It makes we who are saying, I have this need that only you can meet, it makes me a slave to the person I think is the only one who can fulfill my need, right? And it makes me tend to exploit them or manipulate them in order to get my needs met. And that's why in this verse it's saying that Krishna is also giving a demonstration of what happens in material life when men become lusty. That if a man is thinking, I have this great need for my sexual satisfaction and only you can meet this need in this way, then he becomes subservient, he becomes a slave to the woman. And throughout the Shastra is a warning to men, don't become a slave to a woman. Now it's really interesting, we have a lot of devotees and people associated with the movement who get upset at negative generalizations made about women in the scriptures. And I say there's just as many negative generalizations made about men. They're just not popping out at you in the same way. And one of them is that men tend to become a slave to women. This doesn't happen in reverse so much. But men tend to degrade themselves. And this was said by King Muchukunda. He said, I conquer all of my enemies and then I become a slave falling at the feet of a woman. And if a man becomes like that, then what is said here in the Bhagavatam and echoed by our acharyas is the woman becomes hard-hearted. Because she starts thinking, well, this man is dependent on me, so I can do with him whatever I like. because he's become my slave. And it makes her hard-hearted. And this is a very sad condition because it's said in the story of Daksha and his daughter Sati that women are by nature very soft-hearted. Actually, that's another condemnation of men as a class, that men as a class tend to be hard-hearted and women as a class tend to be soft-hearted. So both males and females lose their dignity and they lose their higher qualities when they get in this mood of, I need you and only you can meet my need and I want to use you to meet my need. It damages our nature, and it is not the ideal of the masculine or the feminine. The ideal of the masculine is that he's a leader, not a slave, and the ideal of the feminine is that she's soft-hearted. That the ideal masculine is self-controlled and the ideal feminine is soft-hearted. So it appears here that Krishna has become a slave and his gopis become hard-hearted. But that's not the fact at all. Why? Because they're Atmarama. They're Atmarama, they're Atmarati. And this is true, by the way, for all of us souls also in our pure state. We are also Atmarama and Atmarati. One can only be fully self-controlled, and one can only be fully a good person, a dharmic person, a worthy person, if one is fully satisfied in oneself. Because if one's fully satisfied in oneself, one doesn't need anything from anyone. Atmakama, one can fulfill all one's desires by oneself. Why not? Krishna says, Niryoga Kshema Atmavan, don't be concerned about gain and safety, be satisfied in the self. Why? Yoga Kshema Vahamyaham, I'm giving you everything. When I'm in touch with the infinite, I have infinite. Therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that a self-realized soul has no reason to work, no reason not to work, and no reason to depend on anybody. They're their own source of satisfaction. I think of it like an underground spring that's flowing constantly and filling us up constantly. Then if I don't need anything from anyone, why would I interact with anyone? Imagine if everybody was fully satisfied within themselves. So then people think, well, if everyone's fully satisfied within themselves, everyone just sits in a yogic trance, and they're just there, satisfied within themselves. Nobody does anything. And Krishna says, self-realized person has no reason to do any work. All right, that's fine on the platform of Brahman realization. That's true. Nasochati nakanchati. But again, then why do we have this idea of some ideal love? Where does it come from? It comes from the fact that higher than that is relationships that are 100% voluntary. They're not motivated by some inner need or some inner push or some inner hunger to satisfy myself at someone else's expense. They're motivated by love. We don't know what love is in this world. We see little glimmers of it here and there, every once in a while. Sometimes we see a little bit of that selfless love of the soul peeks out like a cold, cloudy, rainy day, and sometimes the sun comes out for a minute. But we don't generally have that experience. What is love? Love means I'm completely satisfied. All my desires are fulfilled internally. I don't need anything from anybody, but I love you just to love you. You can think of it like if we have this spring in our heart, this eternal, unlimited spring of satisfaction and happiness. And it's so much that, like David, my cup is overflowing. And you want to share. Like if you cook a lot of pizza and you can't eat all of it, and you invite your neighbors over for pizza because you're satisfied. You don't want anything from anyone. You want to share your own joy. And that's all. You have enough, You're overflowing, and you want to share your joy just to share your joy, just for the happiness of sharing your joy. Therefore, Jiva is quoting the Lord, who's the source. I mean, we can get this little fountain from the infinite, but he's the infinite. And that Krishna says, I don't enjoy my own bliss without my devotees. I want to share. That's where the whole concept of like this whole Christmas with gift giving, where does it come from? Why don't people take the money they would spend on Christmas gifts and buy something for themselves? Why don't we have a 6-week buying spree every year? Whatever you have as your Christmas budget, $500, $2,000, whatever people spend on Christmas. Spend it on yourself, then you know you'll like what you get. Why do we spend it on gifts? We don't know if the other person will like it. We don't know if we're going to like it. It's a little idea that real joy is in giving. Real joy is in sharing. And that's what Krishna is demonstrating here. He's demonstrating, I'm God. I'm the source of everything. I'm fully satisfied, and yet my joy increases by loving my devotees. And that's the perfection. And the ultimate expression of that love is in this Madhurya Bhav. Madhurya means sweet. This Sringara Ras, this Madhurya Bhav. That's the ultimate giving, the most intimate, the most complete giving. And when we meditate on that, then we no longer have any interest in any of the lusty affairs of this world. Thank you very much. Sukadeva Goswami's philosophical explanations of Ras Lila Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki